I identify as non-binary, so I use they, them pronouns, which is sometimes confusing for people because people consider that to be a plural. But I guess kind of the easiest way to think about it is in terms of like if you see someone, for example, if someone drives past you in their car and they cut you off or something and you're like, oh, this person's driving terribly, they just cut me off in traffic. That's kind of how I want it to be used for myself. It doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be plural. And that's often something that trips people up and makes it like, I don't know, people often give me resistance when I tell them I want they and them. They're like, but it's a plural. And I'm like, well, no, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, my story with sexuality has been kind of a weird one. I've never really had like a clear sense of my sexuality. I think obviously like most people I kind of default identified as straight when I was younger. Although I don't think I ever really actively identified as straight. It was more just like, I just didn't really think about it, and in school I like looked up with boys and girls, people who identified as boys and girls. But I was always like felt I suppose quite restricted by heterosexuality. But yeah, so the sexuality question has been kind of, when I started figuring gender stuff out, it was like kind of sidelined. And now I'm kind of at the point where if I have to identify as, like give a name to my sexuality, I say either pansexual or demi-pansexual, which is just, I just kind of enjoy the words. Because I don't have a specific preference at all. And my attraction is very personality based, which is, I don't know if demisexual is not maybe a very widely known one, but that's basically what it means, is like you don't experience sexual attraction or any kind of attraction really unless you have some sort of a sense of the person. And I can like be kind of into a person and then they say something problematic and then it's like done. So my sexuality, my sexual attraction is a very like personality based, and kind of usually takes a bit of time and stuff like that. So really I kind of personally identify as not really having any kind of particular sexual identity. It doesn't really feel like a part of my identity that much, it's just kind of an interaction. Yeah, I guess I have experienced like discomforts with how I'm expected to be, kind of based on the gender that I was assigned at birth, which was female. And like felt really restricted by that a lot and resisted it a lot when I was younger, and was like really kind of like really traumatized by puberty, like really uncomfortable, freaked out, like hated it, didn't want it to happen, kind of refused to fall in line with the things that were expected of me at that age, which is like to start wearing dresses and like shaving my legs and liking boys and wearing makeup and stuff like that. Which is what my friends were starting to do, and it like really freaked me out. And I resisted that for quite a while. And then in high school I kind of gave into it a bit, but like I always kind of, I don't know, found ways to do it that made me a bit more comfortable, so I dressed like super weird. But yeah, so I think I was just always kind of trying to figure out a way to resist the binary without really realizing that was what I was doing, so I didn't have a language for it. And then I got to university, and it was actually only in my, like sort of early in my master's when I was writing, because my master's thesis is about gender. And I was reading like a lot of gender theorists and stuff. And I started to kind of, be confronted with this idea that it's all imposed, that it's all performative, and that we're kind of keeping it up all the time and kind of, reconfirming the ideas that society's kind of imposed on us through our performance of our genders. And then I was reading a lot of stuff like on Tumblr and stuff like that. Like the internet is hugely important to me in this process. But yeah, I just sort of started thinking about it like gender is more performative and playing around with like presentation and stuff like that. And then after a while, I kind of started more actively understanding myself as non-binary. And then I kind of shifted quite hard away from feminine presentation and presented quite like masculine for a while, because it made me, I don't know, I guess it just felt like more of a disruption. And like I felt a little bit like if I could be read as masculine instead of just like default feminine, that I at least was like somewhere closer to being read the way I wanted to be, even though it's really hard to get people to read you as non-binary because most people don't understand what that is. The longer I kind of spent in this mindset and kind of practicing, I guess, my gender in this way, the more comfortable I became with using words like non-binary, and then I started using trans to refer to myself, which some not all non-binary people think of themselves as trans, but some do, and that for me was kind of partly a political gesture in a way, because there's like a lot of non-binary erasure in the trans community. So in some ways it's kind of a gesture of resistance, and also I don't know, I guess it feels kind of honest to me. Yeah, and so now I'm now kind of at the point where I'm sort of, it took me a while to like ask my friends to start using my pronouns, and it's still kind of difficult, and I haven't really spoken to like my parents about it and stuff like that. But I'm quite comfortable in myself now. Like I have quite a solid sense of my identity, and I think that's just mostly kind of through like talking about it a lot and thinking about it and allowing myself the room to figure it out. So my identity feels quite stable, and I'm at the point where like I'm not that uncomfortable wearing like more feminine clothes, because you know, I mean, clothes are just clothes. They don't come with a gender intact. That's just how they're read, and sometimes I don't care how I'm read. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So yeah, I'm kind of, yeah, I guess that's kind of where I am now. What does a gender binary mean to me? I hate it. I mean, yeah, like it's incredibly restrictive, and it governed my life for a really long time in a way that made me unhappy. And now I've shifted away from it in my kind of personal understanding of myself and in my presentation a lot of the time. And I'm like much more comfortable with that. And it is like the kind of thing where in an ideal world, like we could just magic it away, and I think everyone would be much better off without it. It's not necessary for anything. It's not necessary for relationships or for reproduction or any of those things. That stuff will still happen. And yeah, I just basically think it's incredibly aggressive. The stories that trans friends of mine told me about the experiences that they've had and the experiences I've had and stuff like that. It's just so unnecessary. It's just ridiculous. So yeah, I see the gender binary. So coming out is such a difficult one. It's like often framed in such a like one-off kind of decisive way, like you come out and now you're out and now you're free and you're in the world. But that's not at all been my experience. There are some people, like my parents barely have a sense of, I've tried to speak to my mom, she doesn't really understand and doesn't really try to. I have a very good relationship with my mom. In general, but it's just, I think it's just hard for her, to understand. Coming out is it's a constant, it's like a daily process kind of. And there's some cases where it's not really safe for you to be out. Yeah, so it's taken a while. The first few, like I suppose the early conversations I had when I was like first figuring stuff out and like giving like words to it and stuff, that felt like really liberating. since then, there are moments where it's great, but often it's just like quite hard and tiring. You kind of get to a point where you just, I don't know, you want to like beam information into people's heads without having to like go through the whole process of like, well, this is my thing, this is who I am, if you don't mind respecting that. Sometimes coming out can be a bit of a bummer. Particularly I think with like when you have non-normative pronouns, because if you come out to someone and they know and you've asked them and they still keep messing it up, that can be like quite disheartening. It's sometimes almost easier if people don't know sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. So I think it just really depends. There have been some cases where it's really, like changed my life, and people's responses have been like amazing and really supportive, and those are the people that I always go to, when I need them. And in some cases where it feels really shitty, kind of pushes you back a little bit sometimes. And I think most people have experiences like that. People, like that whole thing of like it's a phase or it's political, or I think that's kind of how, at least maybe my dad sort of thinks about it, is like that my like queerness is a political gesture over something like I'm just being difficult or something like that. So yeah, I don't know, I think coming out is much more complicated than the movies like to make it seem. I have. Sometimes I do, it depends. Like I've had weird experiences. I had like a really weird experience at the waterfront where someone called me a morphe, and then they read me as a gay man, and then were like really weird and aggressive toward me. So I've had little experiences like that, and I've had strange experiences of people just kind of thinking it's okay to come up to me and ask me if I'm a lesbian. And the most threatened I ever felt was when I was arrested at the beginning of this year, in connection with the protest. And I was kind of verbally abused by the police. And I think that was kind of the only time I can really remember of just like wishing I could easily present as a woman, just so that I could like not have that kind of thing directed at me. Yeah, it was probably the most unsafe I felt. Like, when they were arresting me, they kind of grabbed me, like, they were very rough, and they grabbed this cop who, like, presented as a man, like, grabbed me quite roughly and said, like, because they sort you into vans according to your gender. So they were like putting the men into the men's van and the women into the women's van, and I was like, I'm wearing my van. But the cop like grabbed me really roughly and was like, what is this? To like one of the other police. And I was like, like my whole self, like what is this? And it was just like being like brandied about like a thing. And because I didn't feel like going into the whole thing of like, well, I'm non-binary with this like violent police person. So I was like, I just said I'm a woman, even though I hate having to say that, but I just, just for simplicity's sake. And then he like doubted me, and I was really angry. So I was like, what do you want to see? And he was like, yes. So it was like I felt very unsafe, because it was like a kind of double whammy of like transphobia and sexual harassment. And then I just got myself into the van, and then when we got to the police station, it was like joke after joke, like what's this thing, and like, like all these police people like together laughing at me, and then I had to just like be in this environment with them for hours and hours and hours and hours, and every new place I got to, there would be like a whole thing of like, where do we put this thing? And so that was like a really violent experience. Changes. Sometimes I experience like dysphoria, kind of mostly social dysphoria, which is like when I feel like my gender is, like the gender that I kind of personally experience is not being perceived socially. That kind of often creates like I guess dysphoria. It makes me really uncomfortable and unhappy. And it's in times like that where I tend to present more like masculine, because it's just kind of easier for me to feel comfortable in public under those circumstances, because at least, I don't know, people read me as something other than just like straightforwardly female or like feminine, whatever. When I feel kind of exposed, I suppose, to people's scrutiny and stuff when I'm like in crowds and things like that, and I can feel the way that people are looking at me, and I often get like really, like I get the kind of see people checking for like what body parts I have and stuff to figure me out, and that can make me feel quite exposed. I feel quite like, but that I'm quite hardened to that, and I can get through that by just like, I don't know, wearing things that make me feel comfortable or scowling a lot. So that's actually kind of something I've learned to manage, but I think maybe I'm more vulnerable really when I'm in like more personal settings with like people that I care about, and they misgender me, and I don't know how to speak to them about it or ask them to try harder, because it's sometimes just too tiring. I think I've heard this before. I don't know, like I guess for me, like beauty is kind of become quite tied up with like strength and stuff for me, so I guess I feel the most like beautiful when I manage to like construct like an outfit or something which makes me feel like really strong and defiant. Really, like clothes, I find it to be like a really important part of, for me, for like identity and presentation, obviously in presentation and stuff. But yeah, they've meant quite a lot to me in this whole process. Yeah, so I guess for me it's like quite a personal thing. It's like very internal. It's not so much about like recognition as it is about being able to kind of leave the house feeling like really kind of strong and intact, I guess. I guess the major thing for me is just to like, what they should be doing, I guess, is listening a lot, but also like doing their own reading and stuff like that. I think they need to take on, like allies need to take on the role of like learning and understanding without expecting people to explain it to them all the time, expecting people to like make themselves really vulnerable and raw in order for them to understand. And they also should be kind of doing the work of disrupting gender and sexuality norms, even if it's not through their own like lived experience, but just in terms of like automatically gendering people is something that they should be like, that people should be like working away from, and I think that that's something that like allies should be doing. But I think that like a really important thing to do is just to like learn and understand, and then further those ideas, like take them further, like spread them to their friends who, you know, are maybe also like straight and cis or whatever, and kind of like just make it so that the onus isn't always on people who are already struggling to exist, to explain to people and teach people. I think it mostly just comes from like centuries of like an established norm. We're all raised with these ideas from, you know, like from day one. and it's at the point where it's been so normalized that it seems natural. It seems like, and it's really hard to shift those ideas, even for people who feel like really different to how they've been raised. It's really hard to let go of those things and not feel like you are somehow wrong in some way, even though, actually these ideas are not natural. They're very social. They're very socialized and consistently repeated in the way that society is made up. But it's just really, really hard to shake when you have ideas that you've been raised with, that you've never really considered. You don't, people don't think those ideas into being. You don't think up straightness by yourself or whatever. You don't no one really gets brought up making up their agenda. It gets imposed on you in a lot of ways. So you just kind of think of them as natural, and you don't really ever give them much thought unless they're being disrupted in whatever way. I guess the people who are still in the closet, it's one thing I would say is don't feel pressure to come out. I think there's often a lot of this impetus in the LGBTQIA+ community to be out and then you'll be okay and then everything will be better, and you have to come out to be honest and stuff like that. And I think that can be really problematic because it doesn't take into account people's circumstances, and a lot of the time it's really not safe for people to be out. And sometimes you can, figuring stuff out on your own can be sort of more important than having other people recognize it in some cases. It is really nice to be recognized by other people, so I guess part of my advice then would be to try to find people who you can trust. But if you can't come out to your family, and if you can't come out to your friends necessarily, that's not a failure of yours, it's a failure of society. And if possible, try and find even just maybe online a community where you feel you can be yourself, because I think a lot of what's scary about it is that sense that you're alone and you're the only one that's wrong or whatever. So just even being able to go online and see these established communities of people who have similar experiences can be really liberating. And I guess that's my main advice, is to always just don't feel pressure to fit in with any kind of norm, even within an LGBTQIA+ norm, of being out and proud. That doesn't have to be, that's not the only way to be.